You feel it bubbling up, that familiar knot in your stomach. Maybe your heart starts to race, your palms get clammy, you feel a little shaky, maybe short of breath.
Yeah.
It's that unmistakable wave of fear or anxiety washing over you. And what's your first, most immediate instinct? Run. Escape. Get away from the situation, the place, the thought, the feeling. Do anything, to make it stop.
Anything. It feels totally like self-preservation.
Right. Like the smartest thing you could possibly do in that moment.
Yeah.
But what if that powerful, deep-seated instinct to flee the discomfort is actually, ironically, the very thing that keeps you stuck? What if the real, proven path to less anxiety, to taking back control of your life and experiencing true freedom, involves turning towards that very discomfort, leaning into it, instead of desperately trying to get away?
Sounds so counterintuitive, doesn't it?
It really does. And that's the ground we're covering today in this deep dive, drawing on insights from behavioral science and therapeutic approaches, specifically designed to help you face your fears head on.
And that instinct to avoid is so powerful because, in the short term, it works. It absolutely provides immediate relief. Our brains are just hardwired to seek relief from discomfort.
Makes sense.
But as you said, that short-term gain comes at a significant long-term cost. Many situations and internal experiences that trigger this intense anxiety response in modern life aren't actually life-threatening dangers. Not really.
Right, like a crowded room isn't usually a saber-toothed tiger.
Exactly. They are situations our minds have learned to perceive as dangerous, often through past experiences or just, worry cycles. And the act of avoiding them constantly reinforces that faulty learning.
So, our mission here in this deep dive is to really understand this cycle.
Yeah, and crucially, explore the scientifically backed strategies to break free from it, guided by the material we've looked at.
Okay, let's really unpack this avoidance trap, because it feels so logical, doesn't it? You feel bad, you leave, you feel better.
It absolutely makes sense from a very primitive perspective. When your system perceives a fear cue, could be anything, something outside you, or even just a feeling inside, the fight, flight, or freeze response kicks in.
And flight avoiding is a major go-to.
It really is. Escaping the situation does typically result in a rapid reduction of those intense physiological sensations. The racing heart, the shaking, the shortness of breath, that awful feeling of dread. That immediate drop in discomfort feels like a win.
It's like, phew, crisis averted. Even if the crisis was just, think about making a phone call.
Precisely. Or walking into a slightly crowded grocery store, like you said.
Yeah.
And think about the specific examples we saw. For someone struggling with social anxiety, avoidance isn't always just physically leaving. It can be much more subtle.
Like not speaking up.
Exactly. Refraining from initiating a conversation you'd actually like to have. Maybe biting your tongue instead of asking a question in a meeting because you're afraid of sounding stupid or inept. It's avoiding eye contact, staying silent in groups, or just completely sidestepping social events, parties, gatherings where you might meet new people. Unfamiliar territory.
And even during interactions, there's mental avoidance too, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Excessively critiquing yourself afterwards, replaying conversations over and over in your head, just tearing yourself apart over tiny perceived missteps. All of these are ways to avoid that dreaded feeling of being negatively judged or just feeling socially awkward.
And for something like agoraphobia, the avoidance can become, incredibly debilitating. It can physically shrink a person's world.
That's very often the unfortunate reality. The material describes these patterns like rigidly avoiding public transportation or relying entirely on delivery services to avoid going into stores or restaurants.
Wow.
Or if they do manage to go out, they're constantly scanning for threats, staying glued to exits or planning escape routes.
That sounds exhausting.
It is. And in severe cases, this can escalate to becoming effectively housebound. Profound isolation. They might avoid big open spaces or cramped enclosed spaces, standing in lines, crowded areas, basically anywhere they fear having intense panic symptoms or feeling trapped with no easy way out.
So the fear of having a panic attack in public leads directly to avoiding public places.
Which in turn makes the fear of public places even stronger.
It's a vicious cycle. The fear justifies the avoidance, and the avoidance strengthens the fear.
Exactly. And this pattern isn't just for specific phobias. Think about generalized anxiety. It fuels its own kinds of avoidance.
Like what?
Like avoiding opening your mail because you're afraid of unexpected bills. Or delaying, maybe avoiding altogether. checking medical test results, or even avoiding certain situations at work after making a mistake, just paralyzed by the fear of repeating it or facing judgment. It's really pervasive across different types of anxiety.
And post-traumatic fear, too. People avoiding memories, thoughts, situations that remind them of a trauma. That avoidance feels like it must be necessary, like a protective shield.
It really does, and it's completely understandable. In those cases, the avoidance behaviors, whether they're external, like avoiding certain places, or internal, like trying to suppress memories.
Maybe constantly seeking reassurance.
Exactly. Seeking reassurance, staying physically close to a safe person, even using strategies like excessive worry or constant distraction. They're all aimed at escaping painful internal experiences. Those intrusive memories, the intense emotions, the catastrophic predictions about future danger. Worry itself can be a form of avoidance, you know?
How so?
It keeps you focused on a hypothetical future threat, which kind of prevents you from being present and engaging with life right now. It feels productive, but often isn't.
Okay, so we definitely get that avoidance provides that quick hit of relief.
Yeah.
Feels immediately rewarding.
And here's the absolute crucial point that the sources really hammer home. That rapid temporary reduction of the physical anxiety sensations acts as a powerful positive reinforcer for the avoidance.
Like a reward signal to the brain.
Exactly. It sends a clear, although ultimately false, message. See, that worked. Avoiding the situation made the bad feeling go away. Therefore, the situation must have been dangerous, and avoidance was the right strategy.
Even if, objectively, there was no actual danger present at all.
Precisely. The perceived benefit reinforces the idea that the feared thing is dangerous even when it's objectively safe. And what's the consequence?
You become more likely to avoid it next time.
Yes, more likely to avoid that situation or similar ones in the future. This feeds the fear, makes it grow stronger, more entrenched, and it progressively restricts your life. It narrows your world. The sources are very clear. Avoidance behavior increases the probability of future avoidance and amplifies the fear and anxiety over time.
Which could lead to more frequent or intense panic attacks.
Potentially, yes. And then even more avoidance. It really spirals.
It sounds like you're letting fear draw the map of your life. And it's a fear that's being constantly, maybe accidentally, trained to get stronger.
It's a self-perpetuating cycle, and it's driven by that lure of short-term relief. The sources also connect this pattern of avoidance to living outside the present moment.
How does that work?
Well, ruminating endlessly about past mistakes, rehashing them long after any useful lesson could be learned, or worrying excessively about hypothetical future catastrophes.
It's your mind stuck in the past or future.
Exactly. Tethered to what was or what might be instead of letting you fully engage with what is. And worrying can even feel productive, can't it? Your mind might tell you, I'm worrying about this so I can be prepared, or my worrying is somehow preventing the bad thing from happening.
Yeah, I could see that.
But often, this kind of mental avoidance just drains your energy, prevents you from taking effective action right now, and robs you of opportunities for connection or growth, or just simple enjoyment of life as it unfolds. That feeling that predicting a catastrophe feels like problem solving. That's a really powerful trap.
So, if avoidance is the deeply ingrained, natural, but ultimately detrimental response, what's the alternative? You're saying we have to run towards the fire, not away from it. Lean into the discomfort.
That's the revolutionary core idea presented in the source material, and it's backed by, decades of research. The path to overcoming fears and anxiety isn't about magically eliminating the feared situations or making the uncomfortable internal stuff, thoughts, feelings, sensations, urges, just vanish.
So it's not about getting rid of the feeling.
No, it's fundamentally about learning to tolerate them, to make space for them, and to change your relationship with them so they no longer dictate your behavior. It's about showing yourself through direct experience that you can actually handle the discomfort.
And this isn't just about, gritting your teeth and being tough.
Not at all. This is based on scientifically proven, structured methods, most prominently exposure therapy, which is a cornerstone of behavioral psychology. And it's also integrated into broader values-focused approaches like acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT, which the sources also draw heavily upon.
Okay.
The ultimate goal isn't to never feel fear again. Fear is a normal, sometimes even useful emotion, but to lessen its power over you, to reduce its impact on your choices and actions, and ultimately to feel more in control of your own life.
So it's about cultivating the capacity to choose courage.
Exactly. Choosing courage and freedom, guided by what matters most to you, even when fear shows up.
Okay, that makes sense on a conceptual level. But how does deliberately facing something scary actually make it less scary over time? What's the science happening behind the scenes when you do this?
Yeah, good question. The sources outline several powerful mechanisms at play during repeated controlled exposure. First, and maybe most directly, it disrupts the avoidance patterns.
Breaks the cycle.
Exactly. You break that learned association where avoidance equals relief, which equals reinforcement of the fear. By staying in the situation, you prevent that reinforcement loop from completing.
You're essentially showing your brain through direct experience, okay, I didn't run, and the terrible thing I predicted didn't happen. Or maybe something uncomfortable happened, but I survived it. I can cope.
Precisely. You are providing corrective learning experiences. Second, it builds tolerance. This is absolutely crucial.
Tolerance for the discomfort itself.
Yes. You learn, experientially and physically, that you can experience intense discomfort, anxiety, panic, difficult feelings without them actually harming you or lasting forever. Anxiety isn't dangerous, however unpleasant it feels.
That's a big one.
It is. And the sources point out that if you stay in a feared situation and allow the anxiety to be there without running or using those safety behaviors, the anxiety often peaks and then quite naturally begins to decrease on its own over time.
It's like riding out a wave instead of trying to swim against it or outrun it. The wave eventually passes.
That's a very helpful analogy. You learn that the peak intensity just isn't sustainable. Third, exposure allows you to examine the evidence.
That's your predictions.
Exactly. Test your catastrophic predictions. Your anxious mind generates all these what-if scenarios. What if I freeze up? What if I totally embarrass myself? What if I have a panic attack and nobody helps?
Right.
When you intentionally enter the feared situation and stay there, you get to compare your prediction to the actual reality. And what you usually discover is that your worst-case scenario rarely, if ever, happens.
And even if something uncomfortable does occur,
it is almost never as awful or unbearable as your mind predicted it would be. The concept of a what are the odds worksheet mentioned in the sources kind of illustrates this. You're gathering real-world data that contradicts your fear's narrative.
So your mind makes something maybe mildly unpleasant feel catastrophic.
It can, yeah. And intentional exposure, sometimes they call it practicing getting anxious, proves that the feeling doesn't actually align with real danger.
And fourth, you mentioned a fourth point.
Yes, and this connects strongly with those ACT principles we mentioned. It changes your relationship with your internal experiences, your thoughts, feelings, physical sensations, and urges.
How so?
This is where you learn to notice these internal events, the racing heart, the critical thought like you're going to mess this up, the urge to flee without immediately fusing with them, or believing them as absolute truth, or feeling compelled to react automatically.
So you see them more clearly.
Yes. You learn to see a thought as just a thought, a sensation as just a sensation, an urge as just an urge, not as a command or a reflection of objective reality. This creates distance. It creates choice.
Which brings us to some foundational skills that make this whole process possible. Mindfulness and acceptance. These concepts get talked about a lot, but how do they specifically empower someone to face fear?
They are absolutely fundamental, particularly within the framework of psychological flexibility that the ACT approach emphasizes. Psychological flexibility is basically the ability to stay in contact with the present moment.
Including the uncomfortable stuff.
Yes, including uncomfortable internal experiences, while at the same time taking action that is guided by your values, what's important to you.
So it's not about liking feeling anxious, but being willing to feel it if it means doing something important.
Exactly. You're not trying to eliminate the feeling before you act. You're learning to carry the feeling with you while you act. And mindfulness is a core skill here.
Okay.
In this context, mindfulness just means intentionally bringing gentle, non-judgmental awareness to whatever is happening in the present moment. This includes noticing your external environment and your internal landscape.
Like observing thoughts as thoughts.
Precisely. Observing thoughts as thoughts. They're mental events, not necessarily facts. Observing physical sensations as sensations, bodily experiences, not necessarily signs of danger. Observing emotions as emotions, feeling states, not objective truth. And observing urges as urges, impulses, not commands you have to obey.
And acceptance is closely related to that.
Yeah, they really go hand in hand. Acceptance means making space for these difficult inner experiences rather than fighting against them, pushing them away, or getting totally lost in trying to distract yourself or eliminate them.
So turning towards the discomfort.
Yes. Turning towards the anxiety, the fear, the sadness, the frustration. but with openness, kindness, and curiosity, rather than treating it like an enemy you have to defeat. The sources describe it as making space for the feeling, maybe breathing into it, allowing it to just be present in your awareness without judging it. You acknowledge it, you don't wrestle with it.
So are there specific practices that can help build these muscles of mindfulness and acceptance?
Absolutely. Simple practices can be incredibly powerful. Mindfulness of breath, for example, is a really common starting point.
Just noticing the breath.
Just noticing the physical sensations of breathing in and out, gently anchoring your attention to the present moment. When your mind wanders off, which it will.
All the time.
Yeah, all the time. You just gently guide it back to the breath. This builds that capacity to direct your attention where you want it to go.
And focusing on body sensations. That seems really directly applicable to anxiety.
It is. Mindfulness of body sensations involves bringing awareness to the physical presence of your body, maybe noticing the weight of your body against the chair, your feet on the floor, areas of muscle tension.
Or even wiggling your toes.
Exactly. Little things. And crucially, when those anxiety-related physical sensations arise, tightness in the chest, butterflies in the stomach, trembling, the practice is to allow them to be there. Observe them simply as sensations without immediately interpreting them as dangerous or trying frantically to make them go away. It's about building tolerance for the actual feeling of anxiety itself.
The sources also mention something called emotion watching.
Ah, yes, that's a specific practice to help you observe and make space for emotions. When you notice a difficult emotion, like anxiety or maybe sadness, you might first just label it gently in your mind. Fear.
Okay.
Then, without judgment, you turn your attention inward to notice where you feel it in your body. Does it have a particular location? Does it feel like it has a shape, a color, a temperature, a texture? Is it moving or still?
So not analyzing why you feel it.
No, not at this stage. It's simply exploring its physical manifestation and making space for it to be present, allowing it to exist within you without necessarily overwhelming you. There are worksheets that can guide you through identifying the triggers, the sensations, the thoughts, the urges, and the feelings associated with it.
And noticing urges, like that urge to flee or avoid we talked about.
Exactly. Identifying those powerful impulses that come along with fear or discomfort, the urge to escape, maybe to fight back, to withdraw, seek reassurance, endlessly check something. The practice is to simply notice that the urge is present. Recognize it as an impulse, not a command you have to obey.
That seems key. Seeing the space between the urge and the action.
It is. This practice helps you see that there is a space, a crucial moment of choice between the urge itself and the action you take. Mindfulness and acceptance expand that space. And the sources really highlight this. Intentionally allowing yourself to feel worried or scared without immediately defaulting to those safety behaviors or distractions like compulsively checking your phone or seeking constant reassurance that's key to learning through direct experience that you actually possess the capacity to cope with the feeling itself.
Okay, so mindfulness and acceptance give you the tools to notice discomfort and make space for it. But why would you choose to step into discomfort when your whole system is screaming, run? That's where values come in, right?
This is where acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT, provides really powerful motivation and direction. Values, as described in the sources, are like your personal compass. They point the way you want your life to head.
Not goals, exactly.
Right. They aren't specific goals you achieve and then you're done. They are ongoing qualities of action that you strive to embody moment by moment, day by day. Things like being kind, being courageous, being connected, being persistent, curious, being a loving parent or partner, contributing to your community.
So my value isn't get rid of anxiety, but maybe act courageously even with anxiety, or be present with my loved ones even if I feel awkward.
Precisely. They define what kind of person you want to be and how you want to interact with the world and the people in it. And values are absolutely critical in this process because anxiety and the avoidance behaviors it triggers are often the primary barriers preventing you from living a life aligned with what truly matters to you.
Can you give an example?
Sure. If you deeply value friendship and connection, but social anxiety prevents you from going to social gatherings or reaching out to people, then your anxiety is actively blocking you from living that value. If you value creativity, but fear of judgment keeps you from sharing your work or even starting it, you're not living creatively in that moment.
And committed action is taking steps towards those values despite the difficult internal stuff that inevitably shows up.
Yes, that is the absolute core of committed action. It's the action piece of psychological flexibility. It means making conscious choices and taking steps in the direction of your values, even when especially when those steps bring along difficult thoughts, feelings, sensations, or urges.
That's where the courage comes in.
Exactly. It's where courage shows up not as the absence of fear, but as acting while fear is present. The sources outline a process for this. First, you identify an area of your life or a relationship that's important to you, but where you feel stuck or you've been avoiding things.
Yeah.
Then you clarify the values you want to live by in that specific area, what really matters to you there. Then you choose a specific, concrete action you could take that aligns with those values, something you can actually do.
Okay, like let's say I value being a connected parent, but maybe anxiety about small talk or feeling judged keeps me from spending time with other parents at school events. So my value is connection. My desired action is attending the next school bake sale.
Perfect example.
Yeah.
And then crucially, you anticipate the difficult internal experiences that are likely to arise when you take that action. For the bake sale example, it might be feeling intense anxiety beforehand, having thoughts like, everyone's judging my cookies, or I have nothing interesting to say, feeling jittery physical sensations, or experiencing a strong urge to just turn around and go home.
And the committed action is choosing to go to the bake sale while making space for all those uncomfortable thoughts and feelings using mindfulness and acceptance.
That's it exactly. You commit to taking the action and bringing your mindfulness and acceptance skills along for the ride. You go to the bake sale, you notice the anxiety bubble up, you observe the critical thoughts without necessarily buying into them, you make space for the jittery feelings, and you resist the urge to flee. And then, importantly, you notice the outcome.
What happens?
Even if you only stayed for 10 minutes or only talked to one other parent, you acted in alignment with your value of connection. The sources gave that example of someone valuing family connection, wanting to eat dinner and talk with them, anticipating feeling fearful or maybe undeserving.
But they did it anyway.
They did it anyway. And the outcome wasn't just feeling good, but also maybe feeling a bit sad about what they had missed by avoiding it previously. That realization can actually strengthen the motivation, the value for future action.
That seems incredibly powerful, reframing the discomfort. Seeing it not as a stop sign, but maybe as a signpost indicating you're heading in a direction that actually matters to you.
That's a great way to put it. Mindfulness and acceptance create the space, values provide the why, and committed action is the how you move forward, despite the difficulty.
Mindfulness and acceptance skills buy you that vital moment of choice, right? That pause between the urge to avoid and the action.
Exactly. In that space, guided by your values, you can choose a different path. You can choose action aligned with who you want to be.
Okay, we've covered the big picture. Avoidance is the problem. Facing fears head-on is the solution. We need skills like mindfulness and acceptance, and we need to be driven by our values. Now let's get really practical. How do you actually do this facing your fear thing? You don't just pick the absolute scariest thing imaginable and jump right in, do you?
Oh, absolutely not. That would likely be overwhelming and probably counterproductive. You'd just reinforce the idea that it's unbearable. This is where the structured, step-by-step method described in the sources comes in building an exposure hierarchy, sometimes called a fear ladder.
A fear ladder. Okay, that makes sense. You start at the bottom rung.
Exactly. Step 1. Pick one specific fear or type of situation you want to work on first. Don't try to tackle everything all at once. The sources list common areas: fear of crowds, flying, enclosed spaces, public speaking, specific body sensations like dizziness or a racing heart, specific objects like animals, heights, needles, blood. Choose the one that is currently most getting in the way of you living according to your values.
Okay, so focus on one fear area. Got it.
Step 2. Make a detailed list of specific situations or stimuli related to that fear. Be as concrete and specific as you possibly can. If it's fear of public speaking, the list might include things like just thinking about giving a speech, writing the speech outline, practicing the speech alone in my room, practicing in front of one trusted friend, practicing in front of my family, standing up to speak briefly in a small informal meeting, giving a short presentation to my immediate team, giving a longer presentation to a larger group, giving a formal speech at an event. Really break it down into smaller pieces.
So lots of small, manageable steps related to that one overarching fear.
Precisely. If it's, say, fear of contamination, the list might include touching a doorknob in my own house, touching a public doorknob and waiting 5 minutes before washing hands, touching a public doorknob and waiting an hour, touching a public handrail, using a public restroom. The more specific you can be, the better.
Okay. Step 3.
Step 3. Rate each situation on your list based on how much anxiety it triggers for you personally right now. The sources often suggest using a 0 to 100 scale. It's often called a SUDS scale, subjective units of distress. 0 is absolutely no anxiety. 100 is the worst anxiety you can possibly imagine feeling. Just be honest with yourself in your rating for each item.
Got it. A score for each step on the list.
Step 4. Reorder your list. Put it in order from the situation that triggers the least amount of anxiety. That's your easiest step. The bottom rung of the ladder all the way up to the situation that triggers the most anxiety at the top of the ladder. This is your personalized exposure hierarchy. And starting easy is absolutely critical. It helps build momentum and confidence.
Okay, the ladder is built, organized from the easiest thing to the hardest thing. Now what?
Step 5. Start with the very first easiest situation on your list. Intentionally put yourself in that situation. Now, if it's not something you can easily do in real life right away, you might start by simulating it, maybe through imaginal exposure, which we can talk more about. But the goal is usually real-life exposure whenever possible and safe.
And the sources mentioned getting help with this.
Yes, they strongly emphasize that while you can do this individually, especially for simpler or milder fears, the guidance of a trained therapist is highly recommended, particularly for more complex fears or fears related to trauma, or if you have multiple anxiety issues. A therapist can help you build the hierarchy correctly, manage distress during exposure, and make sure you're doing it effectively.
Okay, so you're in the situation, the easiest one. What do you do then?
Step 6, practice. This is where you actively bring in those skills we talked about earlier, mindfulness and acceptance. You stay in the situation and you intentionally allow yourself to feel the fear, the anxiety, the discomfort without avoiding it or engaging in what are called safety behaviors.
Safety behaviors. What are those again?
Safety behaviors are anything you do to try and feel less anxious in the moment, but which ultimately prevent you from learning that the situation is actually safe or that you can handle the feeling without doing anything special. Examples include things like excessively checking things, constantly seeking reassurance from others, distracting yourself nonstop, like constantly checking your phone, carrying a safety object like a water bottle or medication just in case, or strategically positioning yourself near an exit just in case.
Gotcha. Things that make you feel safer but stop you learning.
Exactly. So the practice is to stay with the discomfort and notice the urges to escape or use those safety behaviors without acting on them.
So if the step is standing in line at the grocery store, you stand there, you feel the anxiety rise, you notice that urge to bolt or check your phone, but you just stay there and allow the feelings to be present. You don't fight them.
Precisely. And you repeat this easiest step. You don't just do it once. You stay in the situation or repeat the situation over time until the anxiety it triggers reduces significantly. The sources suggest continuing until the anxiety drops by at least half of its original peak level during that practice. It takes repetition. You might need to do the same step multiple times, maybe on different days.
And the goal isn't necessarily to feel zero anxiety.
Not necessarily, especially at first. The goal is to notice that the intensity decreases over time if you stay with it and don't run away or rely on those safety crutches. This process is sometimes called habituation, or more recently, inhibitory learning. You learn a new association that the situation doesn't lead to catastrophe.
And only when that easiest step feels significantly less scary consistently do you move up to the next one on your list.
That's step 7. Work your way up the hierarchy. Once the anxiety associated with one step has reliably decreased, you move on to the next situation on your list that is just slightly more anxiety-provoking. You continue this process, gradually climbing the ladder, practicing staying with the discomfort at each new level until it lessens significantly before moving on to the next.
This structure makes so much sense.
Yeah.
It breaks down something that feels completely overwhelming into manageable, bite-sized steps. You're not trying to leap to the top of the mountain in one go. You're just focusing on finding the next foothold.
Exactly. It makes it achievable. And the sources also describe different types of exposure practices you might incorporate into your hierarchy, depending on the specific nature of your fear.
Okay.
The most common is probably in vivo exposure. That means facing the actual, real-life external situation. This is often considered the most powerful form because it's direct experience.
So that's the going to the crowded mall example, or driving on the freeway if you have driving anxiety.
Right. Or standing in line, taking public transport, purposely making a small, low-stakes mistake at work if you have a fear of imperfection or judgment, visiting a specific store you've been avoiding, navigating a busy sidewalk, actual real-world practice.
But what about fears that are hard or maybe even impossible to recreate in real life whenever you want? Like a fear of flying, maybe, or specific traumatic memories?
Great question. That's where imaginal exposure becomes really essential. This involves vividly imagining the feared situation or outcome in as much detail as possible in your mind's eye.
How does that work?
You might create a script or a narrative describing experiencing the feared event, including all the sensory details, what you see, hear, smell, feel, as well as the thoughts and feelings that come up. For fears related to panic attacks, this could involve vividly imagining having a panic attack in a public place.
And for trauma?
For trauma, it often involves safely revisiting and narrating the traumatic memory, sometimes focusing on the most distressing parts or hot spots, with the goal of processing the memory and reducing its emotional charge over time. Or you might imagine visiting that store you avoid without constantly checking for exits. Or imagine experiencing panic in public and just staying with the feeling instead of mentally running away.
That sounds incredibly challenging. Really difficult.
It definitely can be, which is why imaginal exposure, especially when dealing with trauma, is typically done with the guidance and support of a trained therapist. They can help you manage the distress, pace the exposure correctly, and ensure it's done safely and effectively.
Okay. Any other types?
Yes, there's also interoceptive exposure. This is specifically designed for fears that are centered around physical sensations themselves. This is particularly common in panic disorder or maybe health anxiety, where normal bodily sensations get misinterpreted as signs of imminent danger, like thinking a racing heart means you're having a heart attack.
So with interoceptive exposure, you intentionally trigger those scary body sensations.
Precisely. You purposefully engage in brief activities that mimic the physical sensations you fear. Examples include things like running in place or doing jumping jacks to get your heart rate up and feel shortness of breath.
Or breathing through a straw.
Yes, breathing quickly through a thin straw can induce lightheadedness or feelings similar to hyperventilation. Spinning in a chair briefly to feel dizzy, holding your breath for a short time, or tensing certain muscles.
Why would you do that?
The goal isn't to cause distress just for the sake of it. It's to provide a safe, controlled environment where you can practice observing those sensations without catastrophically interpreting them or immediately trying to make them stop. You learn through repetition that the sensation itself, however uncomfortable, is not actually dangerous. You practice allowing the jitteriness, the dizziness, the breathlessness to simply be there, noticing the associated thoughts and emotions without automatically reacting in fear.
Okay, so the hierarchy is the roadmap. And these different types of exposure, in vivo, imaginal, interoceptive, are the specific methods you use at each step. And all along, you're bringing those skills of mindfulness and acceptance, and it's all driven by moving towards your values.
Exactly. You've got it. And the sources are really clear. This whole process takes patience, persistence, and lots of practice. There will likely be steps that feel harder than others, or where the anxiety takes longer to decrease than you expected. That's normal.
So don't get discouraged by setbacks.
Definitely not. Every single step you take, even if it feels small, every time you choose to lean in instead of pulling away, that's progress. You're building that muscle of courage and tolerance, bit by bit.
Beyond the core hierarchy process, the sources also mention some other helpful exercises and even lifestyle factors. How do those fit in? Do they refine or support this main approach?
Yeah, they absolutely complement the core exposure work. They help by strengthening your overall capacity to tolerate difficult thoughts and feelings, and by building general resilience, which makes the hard work of exposure a bit easier. One exercise mentioned is talking back to thoughts.
Okay.
This involves first identifying those common, recurring, irrational, or distorted fear-based thoughts that tend to fuel your anxiety. Thoughts like, I absolutely cannot stand feeling this way, or I must escape right now, or something catastrophic is definitely going to happen. Everyone is looking at me and judging me. I'm going to say something stupid and humiliate myself. Or maybe that rigid belief like I must always appear strong and competent no matter what.
Right, those automatic negative thoughts.
Yeah.
And the exercise is actively challenging them.
Yes, it's about consciously developing more rational, balanced, or even just more accepting responses to those thoughts. You practice noticing the thought when it pops up and then consciously countering it or reframing it. So if the thought is, I can't stand this feeling, a talk back could be something like, okay, this feeling is really uncomfortable, but it's not actually unbearable. I've felt this before and it eventually passed.
Or if the thought is, people are judging me.
The response might be, my mind is telling me people are judging me, but that's just an assumption. It's not necessarily a fact. Most people are probably focused on themselves anyway. And even if someone does have a negative thought about me, that doesn't define my worth. It's about creating that cognitive distance, seeing the thought as just a mental event rather than absolute truth, and actively interrupting that negative thought cycle.
And using positive coping statements too, because that's similar.
Absolutely, it's related. The sources discuss using coping statements. These are like pre-prepared, short, personal phrases that you can memorize and use during moments of high emotion or distress to help anchor yourself in reality or acceptance.
Can you give some examples?
Sure. Examples provided include things like, this feeling will pass, thoughts are not facts, I can handle this discomfort, it's okay to feel this way, I can accept things as they are right now, or maybe just notice, don't judge. Rehearsing these statements when you're feeling relatively calm and then deliberately deploying them when anxiety spikes can really help prevent you from getting completely swept away by intense feelings or catastrophic thinking.
There was also the idea of a worry script, writing out your worries in detail. That seems kind of counterintuitive, like you just make yourself more worried.
It can feel that way, can't it? But much like imaginal exposure, writing out your worries in vivid detail is actually a form of intentionally confronting the feared narrative. By putting the worry down onto paper, maybe exploring the worst-case scenario fully in writing, you're exposing yourself to the fearful thoughts in a controlled, structured way.
And how does that help?
Sometimes just seeing the worry written down can make it feel less powerful or overwhelming than when it's just swirling uncontrollably inside your head. It can also help you see the repetitive or perhaps irrational nature of the worry more clearly. It's another form of exposure, really.
And perspective shifting, what was that about?
This involves practices designed to help you shift your focus and gain a different perspective. One technique mentioned is inside-outside shifting. Here, you consciously practice moving your attention back and forth between your internal experience, like your breath or body sensations, and the external world around you. Maybe noticing 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can touch, and so on.
What does that do?
It builds flexibility in where you place your attention. It allows you to deliberately disengage from an overwhelming internal focus when you need to and reconnect with your surroundings. Another really powerful technique mentioned is the photo album exercise.
Okay.
This involves using imagery, your imagination, to view a past struggling version of yourself, or perhaps a struggling loved one, with real compassion. You imagine looking at a mental photo of them during their time of pain and responding internally with kindness, warmth, and understanding.
So cultivating self-compassion.
Exactly. This exercise helps build self-compassion, which is incredibly important when you're facing difficult feelings and maybe perceived failures during the challenging process of exposure. Treating yourself with the same kindness and understanding you'd readily offer a friend who was facing similar struggles makes the whole work much more sustainable and less punishing.
Okay, so beyond these specific mental and behavioral exercises, the sources also touched on broader lifestyle habits. How do things like sleep, diet, and exercise fit into this picture of facing fears?
They are absolutely fundamental building blocks for overall physical and mental resilience. While they aren't direct exposure techniques themselves, they significantly impact your ability to manage stress, regulate your mood, and therefore engage more effectively in the challenging work of facing fears. Getting sufficient sleep, for example, is just crucial.
Why sleep specifically?
Well, chronic sleep deprivation can really mess with neurotransmitters like serotonin, making you more vulnerable to anxiety and impairing your ability to cope effectively with stress when it arises. Good, consistent sleep hygiene, like going to bed and waking up around the same time each day, creating a dark, quiet, cool sleep environment, avoiding stimulants like caffeine and heavy meals too close to bedtime, and maybe incorporating some relaxation techniques. All of this supports better emotional stability.
And exercise. We hear about that a lot for mental health.
Yes, regular physical activity is hugely beneficial. It releases endorphins, which are natural mood boosters. It can also increase feelings of confidence and self-efficacy, which is really helpful when you're undertaking something challenging like exposure therapy.
Makes sense.
Plus, it provides a healthy outlet for the physical energy or tension that often comes with anxiety, and it can improve mental clarity. Even moderate exercise, like a brisk walk for 30 minutes most days of the week, can make a noticeable difference in reducing your overall vulnerability to anxiety.
Diet was also mentioned as a factor.
Yes, definitely. What you consume can certainly impact anxiety levels. Certain substances like excessive caffeine, really high sugar intake, nicotine, and alcohol can actually exacerbate anxiety symptoms or even trigger panic attacks in people who are susceptible.
Right. And on the flip side.
On the flip side, things like nutrient deficiencies or even just being dehydrated can contribute to irritability, fatigue, and heightened feelings of anxiety. So being mindful of your diet, ensuring you're getting balanced nutrition and staying well hydrated supports a more stable physiological state. That makes it easier to manage anxious feelings when they inevitably arise during exposure practices or just in daily life.
And finally, the importance of building a support system.
Absolutely vital. Anxiety and avoidance, particularly in conditions like agoraphobia or social anxiety, can lead to significant isolation, which only makes things worse. Having people you feel you can talk to openly about your struggles, rely on for emotional support, or even just engage with in enjoyable activities really combats that isolation and provides different perspectives.
So not suffering in silence.
Exactly. The sources mention the value of having a diverse support system, people who can offer a listening ear, maybe some practical help sometimes, or perhaps just fun distraction when you need it. Knowing you're not alone in the struggle and having people who understand, or at least try to, can significantly strengthen your resolve to keep facing your fears and maintain the progress you make.
Okay, so we've really mapped out this journey. We started by understanding that avoidance trap, how natural it feels, but how it backfires. Then embracing the counterintuitive solution of actually facing fears. We looked at why it works, building tolerance, testing predictions. We covered the foundational skills like mindfulness and acceptance, grounding our actions in what we value, applying that step-by-step hierarchy, and supporting ourselves with cognitive tools and healthy lifestyle habits. What about staying on track? How do you prevent old fears from creeping back in once you've made progress?
That's a really important point. The sources emphasize that overcoming fear isn't necessarily like a one-time cure. It's often more like an ongoing process of maintaining skills and, frankly, vigilance. Relapse prevention is key.
So what does that look like?
Well, it starts with learning to recognize the early warning signs that your anxiety might be starting to increase again, or maybe the old avoidant patterns are trying to reemerge. These signs could be quite subtle at first. Maybe small changes in your mood, feeling a stronger urge than usual to avoid certain situations you'd been handling, noticing yourself starting to rely on old safety behaviors again, or maybe just an uptick in negative self-talk or worrying.
So being really aware of those subtle shifts is important.
Yes, catching them early is much, much easier than trying to reverse a full return of the problem once it's taken hold again. And the response to noticing those early signs is pretty straightforward. Immediately return to actively using the skills you've learned.
Go back to basics.
Exactly. Re-engage your mindfulness practice. Start challenging those creeping negative thoughts again. And most importantly, recommit to values-based action, even if it feels uncomfortable or effortful. If you notice yourself starting to avoid a situation you've previously managed to face, leaning back into that situation again, maybe even just taking a tiny step from the bottom of your old hierarchy, is crucial. Facing those small fear cues as they arise prevents them from snowballing back into bigger problems.
And leaning back on that support system if you feel yourself slipping, asking for help.
Absolutely. Your support system is a resource not just for initial encouragement, but also for accountability, ongoing support, and potentially helping you recognize when you might need to seek professional help again if things feel like they're getting off track. The core message is that the skills you learn are always available to you. By continuing to practice them, especially when you notice those old patterns knocking at the door, you can sustain the freedom and control you've worked so hard to gain.
So to kind of bring this all together, we started by acknowledging that raw, often deeply uncomfortable feeling of fear and that powerful, very natural instinct to just run away from it. And we've explored how giving into that instinct, while it provides that temporary blessed relief, actually reinforces the fear in the long run. It makes it grow stronger, and it systematically shrinks your world, limits your opportunities to live a life that's truly aligned with what you value.
And we've seen how the path to less anxiety and a more fulfilling life involves this counterintuitive yet really scientifically validated approach of learning to tolerate and make space for discomfort by gradually, systematically, and intentionally facing your fears.
Using structured methods like building that exposure hierarchy, starting with the easiest steps and working your way up, while actively practicing letting go of those counterproductive safety behaviors that keep you stuck. And importantly, supporting this challenging but rewarding process with foundational skills. Mindfulness, noticing what's happening inside without judgment. Acceptance, making space for discomfort instead of fighting it. Connecting with your personal values, understanding why this hard work is worth doing, and choosing committed action, moving towards what matters despite the fear that shows up.
It's a process that fundamentally builds tolerance for discomfort. It allows you to test and ultimately disprove your mind's worst-case predictions. It changes your relationship with your own internal world, your thoughts, feelings, sensations, and ultimately it empowers you to take back control of your choices and your life. It definitely requires courage, practice, and patience, but the evidence is really clear that this approach works and offers lasting freedom from the grip of anxiety for so many people.
I think the key takeaway from this entire deep dive, really, for you listening, is this. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It just isn't. It is the willingness to experience fear, anxiety, and discomfort, and yet still choose to move in the direction of what truly matters to you. Every single time you consciously choose to lean in, even in just a small way, instead of pulling away, you are actively taking back control from your fear.
And maybe consider this provocative thought as you reflect on our conversation today. Think about just one area in your own life where fear or anxiety might currently be subtly restricting your choices, or perhaps keeping your world just a little bit smaller than you'd ideally want it to be. And thinking about what you truly value in that area, what is just one small, maybe bottom of the hierarchy kind of step you could take this week? Something that will probably bring a tiny bit of discomfort, yes, but moves you even slightly towards living that value more fully.
That's a powerful question to sit with, a great place to start. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into facing your fears head-on. We really hope these insights provide you with a clearer path forward and maybe the motivation to start taking those first steps towards a more expansive life.
Reflect on those ideas, maybe identify that one small action you could take. It makes a difference.
We appreciate you tuning in.